Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Jim Tracy, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, author, and also a podcast host. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Hey, what a thrill it is for me to be here. Thank you for the invitation. When you follow someone, it's awesome to come on their podcast and you're like, hey, there's a real person back there. This is great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Jim. Thank you. And I'm very much, thrilled also to have you on the show. You help organizations change, improve, or revitalize their culture with impactful keynotes and workshops that work. And that is why you are known as the curator of culture by your clients. And that
Yeah.
we'll talk all about all this. We'll talk about how one can transform their business culture. In this backdrop, we'll have our conversation. But before that, Jim, let's understand a bit more about your background, your journey, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Sure. I come from a very large family, and there were 8 kids in our house, and then my mom and dad brought 2 more in to help somebody else. So beyond that, we were in a rural environment, so a country boy. But then I got married very young, and have been married now for 45 years. I have 5 children, and 14, soon to be 16 grandchildren. So thrilled about that. And they named me the Grampian, which is a combination of grandpa and champion. So it's another one of the nicknames that I'm so very proud of is Grampian. And as far as business is concerned, my son and I, after a couple of different swings at the plate that I had in business, we decided to start our own business, and we grew it from just 2 of us to a couple of hundred, and in the telecommunications space. And then we sold that into private equity, and now are just trying to help people make their businesses better.
Absolutely, absolutely. But business better in what sense, Jim? I want to understand, because
Yeah.
are they really serious when we talk of making businesses better, work culture, in the backdrop of, the great resignation, quiet quitting, now revenge quitting, and, in that backdrop, when we talk about trying to make company culture, amidst toxic leadership and toxic workplaces? I want to understand that better. Who is serious about this?
Sure. Well, I talk to business leaders every day, and they come to me and they say, hey, we have this problem, we have that problem, we have this other problem. And all those problems center first around leadership. Because number one, have you ever heard of anybody who quit a job that they absolutely loved, that they felt valued at? There were no quiet quits there. There were no revenge resignations there. When people love coming to work because they feel valued, because they feel like they're part of a team, then it changes everything. And so we help business leaders understand the rate of the leader really does determine the rate of the pack.
Absolutely. So that is why I asked, are there businesses still who are serious about it? And why,
Yeah.
if they are good businesses, why did they fall into trouble in the first place? Was it bad leadership? Now they have recognized it. I want to understand that mindset,
Sure.
because things do not go bad, especially in these things. All of a sudden,
Right.
then bad culture becomes your company culture. How
Right.
do you take, how do you then bring that business culture back, the right kind of business? That is why I want to understand through you.
For number one, excuse me, number one, I think it's really important to understand that every business is not just a business. It is a group of people, and it is a team that is gathered together to face a common goal, to face a common enemy, whether that be a revenue enemy or whatever the challenges that they are up against. They have to face them together. And businesses change and morph over time. And if you look at a business and a leader gets complacent in that business, then he's forgotten his mission. And when someone forgets the mission, they can't share it with the people who actually are charged with carrying out the mission. So, from that perspective, every business changes and morphs. And so, we have to be on a common, um, always alert status as leaders that tells us what really matters in a business. Products are important, but they're not as important as the people producing them. Services are critical, but they're not done by people who don't, they're not done well by people who don't really care about their job. And so we have to create an environment where people love coming to work.
Absolutely. And how do you do that? Means, is it what is it that you tell them? Because and that is where your name also comes in when they call you curator of culture. If you curate culture for companies, what do companies do for themselves then?
Yeah. Well, a curator, as most people are aware, comes from the Latin of to care for. And so if you are a curator of an art museum, then you care for those pieces of art. It's not, and you care for the experience of the people who go to that art museum, and you care for every aspect of it. So when you talk about culture, caring for culture involves teaching people to, as especially as leaders, teaching people to care for every aspect of their business. But the most important aspect of their business obviously is the people. So when I go into an organization, there are three things that I try to teach leaders to emphasize, and those fall under this heading. First is humility. Humble leaders are great leaders, and that is one of the leadership traits that is so essential to becoming empathetic and letting your people know you care. If you're talking about yourself all the time, you're not asking about them. And so humble is an incredibly important part of it. The second of this triad of things, I love threes because people can remember threes. You have to be humble, and then you have to have heart. Well, what does that mean? You can say I have heart, but what does that look like when it's expressed? Well, you have to have a heart for your people. Obviously, we talked about that, but you have to have a heart for your client, your customer, your product, whatever it is that you're making money. You have to be a little bit passionate about it. And when you're passionate about it, it's going to show. You cannot define heart, but you know it when you see it. And so that becomes a really important part. And the last thing, and this is where, especially in businesses that are coming up through the levels, you get an entrepreneur who does really well and grinds it out, and everybody knows that he's hungry, and then all of a sudden it starts to evaporate. But it doesn't happen all at once. It's just a little at a time. And so the third H word is hustle. If people see you hustle, they hustle to keep up with you. So leaders must be humble, they must hustle, and they must have heart. And that heart is for all things in their business, not just one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that brings me to another important factor that you talk about leadership, that is does not start with H but C, character
Mm,
driven leadership. Tell us
yes.
a bit about then all these three things that has to come with character driven leadership. What is this
Yeah.
character driven leadership? Is that a prerequisite for building organizational culture?
Um, Absolutely. Character is the most important individual character trait that a leader or any person can possess. Because if you do what you say you're going to do, then people can rely on you and you have credibility. If you have no credibility, who's going to buy stuff from you? Who's going to want to work for you? And so when you just execute the things that you say you're going to do, that's step number one. But then, and so often in business, we say, hey, I want to have a happy customer. Say, I don't want to have a happy customer. I want my customer to be thrilled. I want him to be delighted. I want him to go out into the streets and say, wow, you need to do business with them because of my experience with them, because then my character shows credibility through them talking and bringing other people to me. And it doesn't matter whether it's consumer, industrial, a product or a service, business to business, business to consumer. It's not really even that relevant. If your customers are thrilled, your business will be better. And your employees are going to love because they get satisfaction out of putting together a product or service that their customers want and are willing to pay for. And it has value.
Absolutely, absolutely, Jim. So all these things, if you see character,
Mm,
humility, being humble, heart,
mhm.
hustle. Here we are talking about hustle in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all these things are very natural to us. Then
Yeah.
why has it become such a big issue for leadership and for organizations? Means to accept,
Mm,
harmony in the workplace. Are employees asking too much? To ask a bit of, normality in the workplace,
mhm.
humility from leadership, is that asking too much? Heart and sort of a feeling for employees, empathetic, is that asking for too much? Earlier leaders used to lead from the front. Why
Mhm.
can't leaders again do that? Isn't it,
Yeah.
is it asking too much? Miss, I want, where is the problem? I want to understand then, what is it that your clients come to you for? What is it that they want answers from? Where which answers that they cannot find for themselves within their organization, and how do you help them as the curator of culture?
Yeah. Well, the biggest secret of business is there's no really big secrets to business. And if you do the basics really well, and really, if you look at senior management as an opportunity to get better, and you think about if I'm working every day to get better, to make myself better for my staff, for my company, for my product, for my customers, all of a sudden, all those three H's are going to shine through. And when business leaders come to me, it's typically that there has been some complacency that set in, and they just need to be reminded of the things and the reasons and the purpose behind why they started their business in the first place. And a lot of times with entrepreneurs, they come back to me and they say, well, I started this business because I wasn't happy what I was doing before, and I wasn't happy because. And then you take that because and you say, okay, why are you doing it now? Why are you doing the same thing that drove you to start your own business to the people who are taking care of you? And it really always comes back to the basics. And if you look at leadership or all of the skill sets that were required, when we talk to young people, why are they quitting? Well, they're quitting because they're unfulfilled. They're quitting because they're unappreciated. They're quitting because they don't see a path forward for them to be fulfilled. And if we can create that path through the things that we do with little disciplines on a daily basis. When I give a keynote, one of my most popular keynotes that I give, I hold up three fingers like this, and I say, "This thing is the biggest finger I'm holding up, and it's because it's the most important thing. We have to be generous listeners." If you're talking at your employees instead of listening to your employees, you're making a mistake, regardless of their age. If they're aging out of the workforce, you're making a mistake. If they're coming into the workforce, they're making a mistake. The second finger has a ring on it, and the ring was to remind you that it's a relationship. And relationships must be built. They must be created from nothing, because when you walk into a room, the first time you meet someone, you walk up, you get a first impression. Well, that's your first opportunity to build a relationship. So put a smile on your face. It's easy. Tell people you're happy to see them. And then the last one, and this is the one where millennials are got it right, and the boomers like me, we didn't get it so right. We have to respect people sometimes even before they've earned it. So that little pinky there is really important. If you think about your pinky finger, if you lose it, you lose 50% of the grip strength in your hand. 50%. The little pinky goes away, you're cut in half. And so that little pinky represents respect. And people come to me, they say, yeah, well, he hasn't earned my respect yet. Well, um, you get on an airplane and you look at that pilot and he hasn't earned your respect yet, but you've given it to him already because you're on his plane. And so
Right.
he's earned the respect of just being there. And if we give respect before it's earned, and then if we earn respect before it's given, we've answered most all of the cultural problems that plague us, from silent generation through greatest generation, boomers, X's, millennials, X's, Y's, Z's, and now there's even starting to be the next generation is on the doorstep. The alphas are on the doorstep of our businesses, and they're going to be ready to come to work in a couple of years. And you have to meet them where they live. You can't you can't say, come in and follow my rules and do what I say and don't ask questions. That doesn't fly anymore. It used to, but it doesn't fly anymore. Engage them.
Absolutely engage them. One important thing I want to understand from you, you talk about embracing uncertainty.
Mm.
People want certainty in their lives. And employees, if they see this organization is wobbly,
Uh-huh.
you know, then they
Yeah.
will not feel certain about their own lives. Everyone
Hmm.
wants that their security needs, their basic needs, and certainty, slight bit of stability in their lives.
Yeah.
That's why many people do not want to join startups because of
Yeah.
the uncertainties
Right.
involved. Who is this embracing uncertainty for? Is it for employees or is it for leaders? And what do you mean by this?
Well, for starters, it's for leaders always, because if you're not expecting uncertainty, um, then you're not expecting anything to change. And if nothing is going to change, you're not looking very far back into history. When I talk about uncertainty, there's economic uncertainty. Everybody knows, everybody understands. Interest rates going to fluctuate. Are they going to go up? Yep. Are they going to come down? Yep. Is that going to be a change? Yes. Why wouldn't you anticipate that change? Whether it's up or whether it's down, number one, put a smile on your face. There's not much you can do about it. But if you look at the rest of what we do in business, is your customer going to change? Yeah. Is that uncertain? Yep. What can you do about it? You can do your best. You can bring your A game every day, but you better out be farming for a new customer, because just like the silent quitting, there's customers who are silently quitting your business today. And if you're not willing to grow your business, to work hard enough to grow your business at a higher rate, then your customers are quitting. And then if your customers don't quit, well, now you have a production problem. Let's go solve that. So uncertainty is something that is actually certain. And if we don't embrace it, then we're always in a fight with it. And if we fight with it, everybody's going to watch us. They're going to say, well, he didn't see that coming. Well, it's really certainty if your employees see you expecting curveballs and then hitting a curveball because you had some idea it was coming.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's understand one more important thing. You talk about. I forgot that. I will come to that. Let it be. Sometimes I just in the last moment. But let's talk about your book. There is you have written one particular book. Yeah, I remembered it. Uh,
Yeah.
how does this company culture look for in today's time, especially with AI coming in?
Uh-huh.
Secondly, with uh, with a lot of new generation also coming in their requirements and a lot of remote employees,
Mm-hmm.
how does this company culture encompass all these different people from different places and build up, and so that they also feel that they are part of this company culture and not outsiders for it, because just because they are working remotely? How does it look amidst all this? Because all these things that we talked about humility, heart, you know all these things around a lot of bots, how
Uh-huh.
does that look like? Will there be a different culture for bots, and will there be a different culture for humans?
Well,
How does, help us
it,
understand this?
yeah, if you look at all of the attributes of technology that are really coming into business today, um, and the skill sets that are being used by our employees in order to generate more revenue or generate more workflow or to create more in the funnel. Oh, a- and you talk to them, they view them, even though they're really good at using them and very adept at using them, they view them as simply tools. And I've never seen a tool that didn't require a little bit of training. And so as I look at that, when you think about tools, you think about, hey, I have a hammer, but I still need a nail. I still need a arm that's trained to use that hammer. AI is no different. So it's going to change our workflows, but it doesn't. What it doesn't change is people's needs. And I have interviewed thousands of people that are Gen X and under. And do you know what they're looking for? The one thing that they uniformly are looking for that no one ever knows about: mentoring. They're looking at someone, and they don't care who it is. If you would help me and train me to know what you know, then what happens is I learn to get along with you. Wow. See, two things happen for one price. I taught someone how to do something. And it doesn't matter whether it's if you're writing, if you are creating, if you're manufacturing, if you're welding, even in the medical model. Um, when I talk about leadership in my book, I look at the medical model and it says, first of all, we're going to watch one, and then we know what we're looking for, and then we're going to do one. So if you tried to take out an appendix having never seen an appendectomy, you're probably not going to know what to do. But if you've watched one and now they force you to do one, now you take what you know through observation and you put it into practice with mechanical, with your hands. And so what you get to do is actually perform the task. And then the third part of that model is teach one. So watch one, do one, teach one, because every time we teach, we learn just as much as if we were doing it, for the very first time. And so if we follow what people are asking for, which is mentoring, and we teach them, if we're going to go into a sales force, who knows how to sell right from you don't come out of your mom's uh, birth canal and say, hey, I know how to sell now. I'm going to grow up and be a salesman. Someone has to actually teach you the skill sets, the relational skill sets that will form a great salesman. And so it doesn't matter what your job is. Your job is to bring up and teach and mentor that people who are coming up behind you. If you want to be in leadership, you've got to be a teacher, you've got to be a trainer, and that always involves mentoring.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's so much to learn from you, Jim, and I'm sure there's much to learn from your book as well as your podcast, the Grampian podcast. You are the podcaster. Tell us a bit
Yes.
about your book, what this book is all about, who is that book for, how can they benefit, and also from your podcast, the Grampian.
Wow. The book that I've written is just a reflection of stories. I looked at the people who invested in me, and it really goes back to this mentoring thing again. If I look back at the people who mentored me, then I see people who actually took the time sometimes that they didn't have, and invested in me. And it started with my grandpa, and I walked through, and there's 19 different chapters. Every chapter lists a trait of something that was invested into me that I learned from someone who actually took the time to take a kid in a lot of cases and teach him something. And so those character traits built me. And so I wrote a book to my grandchildren, and everybody said, man, you got to put this out in the marketplace because this is really good stuff. And so on June 3rd, right before Father's Day, we're going to launch the book. It's called Building Men: Character Lessons from Influencers. And you can find it on Barnes and Nobles or anywhere you buy books. If you go buy it in advance, it does me a whole lot of good because it tells people that there's a great book coming out, and Barnes and Nobles would be the place to do that.
Absolutely.
The-
And also about your podcast, Jim.
Yeah. The podcast. So I started doing as our employee base grew, I suddenly walked out in the shop and I realized I used to know every employee, their name, their last name. I used to know all of their children's name. I knew who their wife was. I knew them. And then all of a sudden I thought, I don't know them anymore. I'm going around and we went from, you know, 2 employees to 200 employees. And so as I look forward, I'm like, I don't know their kids. I don't know their wives. I don't know their story. But more importantly, they don't know my heart. And we're in a very, very risky business. And so they needed to know how much I valued their safety. So I started doing internal podcasts to our employees on a weekly basis to say, hey, here's what's important. Here's what you need to know if you want to work here. Here's what's going to be really important for your future. And I love you. And that's my heart. And that turned into when we sold our company into private equity, it turned into a bigger podcast, into a video podcast. And then as I transitioned out of being an entrepreneur into being a business owner that started over again and started with speaking business, I was like, wow, this is something that I should continue because the people who used to work for me are now asking for it. So we started the Grampian podcast. I got named a Grampian by my grandson Wesley. And if you go to, he's like the very first podcast that I did as the Grampian was to have him tell everybody that I didn't name myself. He named me that. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. As I said, there is much to learn from you, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn from you, about your company, and all your thoughts through your book as well as your podcast. What's the best way for them to do so, Jim?
The best way is you can go on to YouTube and look up the Grampian, Grampion, the Grampian, or go to thejimtracy.com. And we'd love to get copies of the books in people's hand. We'd love to do keynote speeches, or if you just need some help and somebody to talk to, I'm usually available.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been my honor, and appreciate you. You have a great podcast.